More than 7,000 Ethiopian soldiers have reportedly been captured by the Tigray Defense Force. Hundreds of those captured have been paraded in the regional capital, Mekelle. In a rare video, they are shown walking towards the Mekelle Rehabilitation Center. According to the Tigray Defense Forces, the captive Ethiopian soldiers walked from Abdi Ashir, about 75 kilometers southwest of Mekelle. The Tigrayan forces marched into the city this week after local officials and federal government troops pulled out. The government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has since declared a unilateral ceasefire. And to discuss this ever-changing but tragic story, we're now joined by African security and policy expert Abdullahi Boru Halake in the U.S. capital, Washington, D.C. A very good evening to you, Abdullahi. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Globe.
My pleasure.
Now, the capture of the Tigrayan capital, Mekelle, puts huge pressure on Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. How do you think he should respond?
It is hard to know how he will respond, but if I was with him, there are three options on the table on how to resolve this. When 6,000 or almost 7,000 of your military is captured as prisoners of war, when you've lost 7 of your 12 divisions in the military, you have to make a clear position. And there are three things to do here. Number one is, as a primary step, there needs to be unimpeded humanitarian access. When 5.2 million of 6 million people living in Tigray region are in need of humanitarian aid, when over 300,000 people are facing famine, when 3,000 children could waste away anytime soon, I think the best thing right now for Abiy is to move very quickly and allow unimpeded humanitarian access. The second thing that he needs to do right now, that is to both Mekelle and Addis Ababa, is mutual recognition. What we have found, what this war, like many wars elsewhere, have shown us, it is going to be incredibly difficult to subdue a population using military means alone. That is not going to work. So therefore, mutual recognition by, Mekelle that Addis and Abiy is the prime minister and the leader of the government, and Abiy and Addis to recognize Mekelle that the elected leaders of TPLF are the leaders. Is this going to be very easy? Far from that. And the final step, and that is in the long term, there has to be a third party sitting between these two warring factions and telling them, look, there is no military solution to this. The only solution is political solution. Because let's be realistic. If Abiy continue taking the path that he's taking, because even after announcing a unilateral humanitarian ceasefire, he still thinks that they have won, and clearly militarily and politically they haven't won. But there is no any other means of unlocking this crisis other than political solution.
Now, Abdullahi, the 8th-month conflict in the northern Ethiopia has killed thousands of people and left millions of people in desperate need of food and other assistance. Will it be a turning point in the war?
If Abiy is very realistic, this is a turning point. He's lost 18,000 of his men. And that is just the snippets that we are getting. Those are just the military officers. There has been, rape and, women. We are facing famine. Ethiopia has been a poster child in the late 80s of, of famine. Famine a lot of the time is, man-made. Yeah. And so if this is not a turning point for Abiy, I think what we might realize is that his push to punish Tigray might push Tigray to, trigger secession from Ethiopia, something that the constitution allows, but the threshold is slightly higher. I think this is a turning point, and, international actors need to lean on him as well as the leaders of the TPLF to make a deal. Is it going to be easy? No, but that is the only way, because military solution cannot take precedent over political solution. Look at what has happened in Afghanistan. United States has been in Afghanistan since September 11th. Yeah. They are now coming back. They cleared Bagram Airport yesterday.
Yes. Now, Abdullahi, remember that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed initially said the withdrawal was a strategic move because the city was no longer the center of gravity for conflicts. So can another redeployment of federal troops in the region happen?
It could. Because Abiy is still intransigent. Abiy still thinks that, at least in his head, even when the facts point in a completely opposite direction, that he has won. So he's saying, I mean, like his first address after announcing unilateral humanitarian ceasefire was, we could come back. All right.
Okay.
So I think that is very dangerous. But also from the TDF, they have said very clearly, like the areas that were taken because the conflict involves the TDF, the Ethiopian military forces, the Tigray, the forces from Eritrea, but also it involves the militia from the Amara region. And so the Amara militias have taken some parts of the Tigray region, and the Tigray government has said that they are going to take that. That could lead to further conflict. But also, I think this is the time for third party, be it AU, IGAD, or Africa, or the United Nations, to lean on also the TDF and say, hey, look, you've pushed out, the warring parties from your region. Can you now, just bring the temperature a notch down for there to be a political settlement,
right,
rather than just sitting by and watching how this will unfold.
Right. And after withdrawing, the Ethiopian government unilaterally declared a humanitarian ceasefire. So where does the latest developments leave that ceasefire?
I think to be honest with you, I don't think they had any other option other than saying that they have declared a unilateral humanitarian ceasefire. Okay. That was purely a face-saving exercise because they have been overrun. They were on the run. They were really in a very difficult position. Can you imagine? Ceasefire is something that is agreed between two parties.
Yes.
This one was declared unilaterally. Uh-huh. If you really declaring it, ideally, you're declaring it from a point of strength. Would you leave behind 6,000 of your military with your enemy and then declare unilateral ceasefire? It's just that they couldn't hack it. Even the first phase that made war very difficult for the TPLF was because the Ethiopians had the support of UAE, which has a base inside Eritrea for fighting Yemen war, and they were using the drones. Once that was pulled back, the war changed in favor of the TDF. So I think they are just trying to save face and say, we've won, we left on our own terms. I think that what we are seeing on the ground, despite communication shutdown, suggests completely different outcome, really.
And the TPLF forces have continued fighting, seizing more territory, including the town of Shira. Is this an indication that the TPLF is now having an upper hand in this conflict?
They are, but they need to be curbed as well. Mm-hmm. They need to be told, you've done the most important job. Ethiopian forces have left. The Amara forces, militia has left. The Tigray, the forces from Asmara are on the north at the border. They are not in your region. Now is the time to make a deal while you have it. Otherwise, this will just lead to more conflict. And that means more misery for a common Tigray who is living in the Tigray region. I think that should be pressed upon them. They need to be told this is actually the best time to do the deal. If that is not done, the worry for me is that Ethiopia, as we know, because the distance and the level of animosity between the two parties is so significant that any further escalation, at least militarily, could lead to, that distance going further and making, bringing them together even harder. As we are, the situation would be incredibly difficult to bring them together. Further conflict is the last thing people in the Tigray and people in Ethiopia and the people in the entire Horn of Africa would need now.
And the Tigrayan forces are also involved in another conflict in the neighboring Amhara state. Now, please unpack this version of unrest in Ethiopia.
Thank you. I think what we need to bear in mind, I think this is for your viewers, is that since Abiy came into power, apart from the first few months, the situation not just between Tigray and the federal government, but even between the Amara region and the Tigray region, within the Oromo region, if you look at this, these are the three largest ethnic groups. Oromo consists of almost 30%, and the rest are in that order. They are big ethnic groups. And so therefore, the move by Abiy has angered so many people. But the one group that, domestically are the most vociferous supporters of Abiy are the Amaras. Why is that? Historically, until 1991, when TPLF and other groups fought for 17 years against the military junta of the Derg, Ethiopia has been ruled using a centralized form of governance. But during that time, most of the leaders, the language of business, the language of bureaucracy, the language of culture, the language of what passes for Ethiopia is the Amara language, right? Mm-hmm. And so when TPLF came into power as the head of the four coalition of parties that form EPDRF, Ethiopia People's Democratic Forces, they changed that in the sense that Ethiopia, they created 9 regions. One was later added to make it 10, where all these regions could be governed by their own means, except, issues around defense and where the federal government has more power. In that regard, the Amara people, particularly the elite, lost. If you go to Oromia region now, the language of instruction, the language of bureaucracy, the language of business is the Oromia language. And the same with other regions as well. So, but also there was a certain amount of land that TPLF, when they came in, they took from the Amara region and made it part of the Tigray region. That combined made the Amaras now use this opportunity when there is a difference between Abiy and the TPLF and the Tigray to take advantage of that. They have taken some of that land, and the TPLF are saying they are coming back to take that land. I want to add one little dimension to an already complex region to make it slightly complicated. Ethiopia also has a boundaries dispute with Sudan, and that boundaries dispute is in the Amara region. So for Abiy now, he has to make a calculated risk. Here, would he, allow that part of the land in the Al-Fashaga region to go to Sudan, which, if you look at all the map, most likely it is legitimately Sudan's land, and thereby lose his most consistent supporters, and that is the Amaras. Or he doesn't do that. The only supply route for TPLF, there are 2 supply routes for TPLF. One is via Sudan and one is via Eritrea. The Eritrea one is closed because of the differences between Eritrea and TPLF. So would Sudan then say, hey, look, you can use this land and make the war go on for so long? So Abiy is in a very difficult situation, and that is why I suggested the 3 steps as part of de-escalating and finally finding a political solution to this conflict.
Tell me, Abdullahi, how much vested is the international community in this conflict in Tigray, and will that determine Addis Ababa's next move?
Ideally, it would. Okay. But I think we also need to be fairly careful that not to overplay what the international community can do. Ethiopia is not some small country. It's a huge country with over 100 million people, right? It is a massive, country, but also it's very strategic for the United States and other countries. Nobody would want to see Ethiopia disintegrate, right? But at the same time, there has to be certain reckoning with some of the actions of Prime Minister Abiy, without which we will probably go into a slow burning conflict that could lead to the disintegration of the country. And when he first launched this war, it was meant to be a law enforcement exercise to unify the country. It could end up being one of those activities that could lead to disintegration of Ethiopia as we know it. And there is a precedent. 1991, Eritrea seceded from Ethiopia.
All right, Abdullahi, it's always a pleasure chatting to you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time.
Pleasure. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you. That was Africa Security and Policy Analyst Abdullahi Boru Halake in Washington, D.C. in the United States.